Hey guys, so where do small lake or pond bass go in the fall? What do they track towards? What are their movements on days when it gets cold, days when it gets warm? You've had a warm spell, you've had a cold spell, it's average temperature, it's sunny, it's windy, it's cloudy. Where do these fish go? And the truth be told, most of you guys are probably not tournament fishermen. Most of you guys probably just like to fish. So a lot of you guys spend a lot of your recreational time on smaller lakes or ponds versus these big, 20 to 100,000 acre reservoirs that a lot of the bigger tournaments are on. And some of these bigger lakes, may be set up a little bit different than these smaller ponds and lakes. Because these smaller ponds and lakes, they generally don't have, any type of current generation. The current would only be generated by any type of wind, basically, in a lot of these lakes and ponds. In a lot of these lakes and ponds, you're dealing with very minimal depths. If you're in a lowland area, a lot of these ponds are only 6 or 8 feet deep in some places. And some smaller ponds and lakes may be 20 or 30 feet deep. But most smaller ponds in flatland areas are going to be relatively shallow. So that doesn't give the bass as many options as it does in a lake where there's ledges and deep drop-offs and, big potholes and places for them to drop off into in the wintertime as compared to these small ponds. They don't have as many options. So they have to deal with what they have. So in the fall, these fish, just like any other place, are going to feed up. Now, as far as like a feeding frenzies and things like that, I don't think, it's not like you're going to go out and catch a gazillion fish in the fall a lot of times, but you're going to catch some really good fat fish. These fish get chasing bait around in these lakes and ponds and sometimes don't even get on structure. So as we talked about in one of my previous videos, the last video posted right here or here, on these warm days, some of these warm days in the fall where it's been cold for a while, these fish get really hard to catch. So here's a couple catches that I had from the other day after we had a good warming trend. I mean, it's warmer now in November than it was at the end of September here. We've been cold from the end of September all through October this year, extremely cold compared to normal. And now we get into November and we've got an Indian summer. So in an Indian summer situation, where are these fish? Well, let's look at a little bit on the water and then we'll talk about it. Hey guys, so here we are out on a local lake. We got an Indian summer situation now. It's November. It's been warm for several days, warmer than average. I got shorts and a shirt on today and I'm very comfortable. So we're going to see what these fish do in the fall after they've faced a long period of colder than average weather. And now we have a warm day. Typically, days like today are some of the worst days to fish in the fall, but you can still catch them. Stay tuned. There's an absolute stud. Like Bill Dance would say, potted meat. Big fat fall feeding up fish. Right out on the tip of a tree, farthest thing out in the lake. Here. I've been out here probably an hour and a half or so. Fishing around a bunch of stumps offshore when the sun was up. Wind's blowing. Fishing around the bank a little bit too. And never got a bite. And I've come through this little stretch here where there's a bunch of slick, no leaves, blow down old trees. And the wind's kind of funneling through here. And these fish have just decided, you know, there's a period of time on the day where they're just not going to eat. And they've just decided something is just triggering them right about now. And now I've just caught 4 fish in like the last 10 minutes. So, just got to keep mixing it up. I bet you I've probably thrown 10, 12 different lures today. And catch them on a creature bait and spinner bait right now. Now these fish I caught on this lake, there's 4 of the catches here. These fish were all on the exact same type of thing. Now, 2 weeks ago, these fish in this same exact lake were out in the lake on the stumps because we'd had cold weather. The water temperature had dropped to about 56, 55 degrees, getting down there. And these fish have pulled off of anything related to the bank whatsoever and gotten out around open water stumps. No grass in this lake, so that's pretty much their only cover in the middle of the lake. So now when you get these warm days, like we've had for about a week now, you know, we've had days, you know, pushing 80 here in November. After, you know, probably the warmest day in the last 6 weeks was like 70. So these warm days, they make these fish do something a little bit different. And what I tell people is when you go out in the fall, or even the winter for that matter, and you get a nice day, you know, a day where, man, it's comfortable, the wind's not ripping, the sun's out, it's warm. These nice days where human beings want to be outside in the late fall and the winter, these are actually probably the worst days to fish as far as numbers go. You can still catch some good quality fish because they're fat from feeding up. But as far as numbers go, it's one of the worst times to fish. Well, why is that? Well, these fish again are sensing this water temperature rising. They're getting a little bit confused. They're, you know, cold-blooded animals, basically. So when this water temperature wants to rise, they want to kind of go shallow again. But they won't necessarily go right back to the bank again in these ponds. What they do and what makes them so hard to catch, and if you have, you know, forward-facing sonar on your boat, you can see it with your eyes. These fish go from down around these stumps to right up in the top 1 or 2 foot of the water column in these ponds. And they just sit there and sun. And when they're sitting there sunning, they're not interested in eating anything. They're really not. They've got a belly full of food that they've been eating on. And they're sitting up there letting that sun warm their body up and helping them digest this food. And the next cold front that you get, they're going to go on another big feed. So, but they get up there and they go basically dormant. The few fish that you can catch when this happens are the ones that still set up on structure. Now, they're not necessarily going to be on these stumps in the middle of the pond or the middle of the lake again or the drop-offs. They're going to suspend, and then they'll get up around something that's, you know, in that 2 foot range or 3 foot range down, but also has some type of cover. So if you have dock pilings in your lake or pond, you know, they'll be around these dock pilings. If you have blowdown trees in these lakes, they won't be on just any old blowdown tree. They're going to be on the longest, tallest, stick out in the lake farthest blowdown trees that there are. And on that blowdown tree, they're rarely going to be more than a few feet from the tips of this tree. So they're going to stay out. They're going to stay out there on that outside edge. And this is what you see me doing in this on the water video. Is I got in an area that had, you know, 4 or 5 nice, probably the biggest blowdown, longest, tallest blowdown trees in the lake that was close to some of the deepest water in the lake, that also was in a funnel down, neck down area of the lake. And we had a right good amount of wind that day, which was creating, you know, a little bit of current flow through this area. So the fish that wanted to feed were using the highest feeding opportunity available, which was the tips of these trees in a neck down area. Not really on the bottom. They weren't on the bottom. They're suspended up in the tips of these limbs and things like that. And the bites that I got, you know, was when I was working it over a limb, or in a couple cases with a spinnerbait, not, you know, reeling it maybe 2 or 3 foot deep and T-boning it. So this is what these fish do. So if we follow the progression of these fish, you know, in the summertime on these lakes, they'll be out on the tips of these trees or in big shaded overhang areas or under docks. They're going to be in the coolest areas they can find, you know, or some shaded backwater area with a lot of lily pads or grass or scum or whatever. That's what they're going to use. And then as fall comes, they're going to go on a feed, and you can be able to catch them pretty much on anything you can see with your eyes. The big topwater bites on then, you know, because the bait's up on the surface running around and the fish are looking up at it. And so you get into this big topwater feed. And then you get these couple of cold fronts that come through, and these fish tend to back off from where they've been in these trees and shaded pockets and whatnot to out on the limbs of these trees or the very tips of the shaded areas. You can catch them there. And then from there, as the water cools down even more, they'll drop off to the first structure that's out off of all this stuff that you can see with your eyes. You know, whether it's boulder, if you have boulders in your lake, hard drop-offs, mostly underwater stumps in a lot of these lakes and ponds because, you know, they were cut off before they flooded the pond, and you have these stumps. And that's where they back off to. Well, then you get this warm front for a week or so, and they don't just stay out there on those stumps that they progressed out to. Now they're starting to progress back in. And if you end up with an extended warm front with warm nights, these fish are going to be right up there in flipping territory where you can flip them out. But at this point in this video that I'm showing you here, this on the water video, the fish have made it back to the tips of the trees again, but a couple more days, you know, if it stays warm, they're gonna be right up there in the trees where you can flip them out like you would do a lot of the other times of the year. So it's a progression. You know, bank, middle of the trees, tips of the trees, stumps and drop-offs, and then, you know, some warm weather, they move right back for a period of time. So they weren't wholly, you know, as a whole, these fish were not completely committed to coming to the bank yet. But they were out on the tips of these trees. So if you remember these things when you go fishing on your little small lakes or ponds, it'll help you to be a better fisherman. If you understand where the fish are, then you don't waste a lot of time searching for them. So, like I said before, lures are tools. Understanding where the fish are is the most important thing, because if you know where the fish are, then you can try to catch them, right? If you know the fish are 6 feet deep, then you're not going to fish 2 feet deep with those types of lures. If you know the fish are on open stumps, you're not going to be up there wasting your time in lily pads and bushes on the bank. You know, so understanding where they are is the most important thing about bass fishing, not the lures. I know you can go out here and every other YouTube video is about lures. You know, this spinnerbait, this lure, this crankbait, this new top water, this new method of catching them, and all those things are fine. All those things are good. But the most important thing, again, is understanding where these fish are living today. And you know, that being said, they don't always go by the rules. You know, they don't always go by the rules. I mean, there's days where you would think there's no way these fish are shallow, and they're all shallow. I mean, they just, sometimes they break the rules, and you got to keep things honest, you know, when you fish. Sometimes you got to keep things honest. You got to try things that you may not think that these fish are doing. But as a general rule, these things I'm telling you about the progression of fish in the fall from warm weather to cold weather, and then back to Indian summer, and then back to cold weather again, this will help you to keep up with the fish in your local pond or lake. Again, I thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I wish you would. Please subscribe to my channel and make you a better fisherman. And also share my videos. And I'd appreciate it very much. Again, thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.